The soft melody of the jazz quartet vanished, replaced by the sharp, ugly crack of a hand striking flesh that echoed through the elegant ballroom. A burning, searing pain exploded on my cheek. I staggered backward, tripping over my own feet, my head hitting the sharp corner of a dining table as I crashed onto the cold marble floor. Amid the 3 shocked gasps of my colleagues and the smug, satisfied glares of my husband's family, the voice of my mother-in-law, Sharon, cut through the air. It wasn't a voice of concern, but one of chilling, venomous delight. Someone had to knock some sense into her. Give her another one, Kevin. What good is a wife who acts like she's better than her own husband? No matter how successful you think you are, Grace, at home, you're just the wife. And tonight, not even God can save you. At the absolute bottom of my pain and humiliation, I fumbled for my phone, my fingers dialing a familiar number as I whispered through a torrent of tears. Ethan, please, save me. God didn't save me that night. But my brother did. And to think, this entire nightmare began just 30 minutes earlier, in what I believed was the happiest moment of my life. That evening, in the opulent starlight room overlooking the glittering expanse of Chicago, I thought I was the most fortunate woman in the world. My name is Grace Anderson, and dressed in a stunning emerald silk gown that my husband, Kevin, had picked out for me, I sat surrounded by jubilant congratulations. This party was for me. After 7 relentless years of dedicating my life to my career, I had finally been promoted to Vice President of Project Development at one of the country's largest real estate firms. I glanced at Kevin, at my in-laws, at my smiling sisters-in-law, and I truly believed that my success was their pride. I thought that 7 years of being a patient daughter-in-law, 7 years of being a devoted wife, had finally earned me their acceptance. I was so wrong. It was a fatal miscalculation. The celebration was in full swing when my CEO, a kind, middle-aged man who had always been my mentor, stood up to raise his glass. "If I could have your attention for a moment," he began, his voice warm. "I am truly overjoyed and immensely proud to have an employee as exceptional as Grace Anderson. She is not only brilliant and talented but possesses a will of iron." He turned to Kevin, clapping him warmly on the shoulder. "Kevin, my friend, you are one lucky man to have a diamond like this for a wife. You'd better hold on tight." The room erupted in applause. I beamed, turning to my husband, ready to thank him for his unwavering support. But when my eyes met his, the smile on my face froze. I saw no pride in his gaze. Instead, I saw a deep, simmering resentment. A toxic flame of jealousy and wounded ego was burning in his eyes. He was gripping his whiskey glass so tightly his knuckles were bone white. It was only then that I realized he had been drinking heavily since the moment we arrived. Just then, I saw his mother, Sharon, lean in close and whisper something in his ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her smug, condescending smirk and the way she flicked her eyes in my direction. I knew it was nothing good. After she finished, she patted the back of her son's hand, a gesture that wasn't meant to soothe, but to incite, to pour gasoline on the fire. Immediately, Kevin shot to his feet, swaying slightly as he lurched toward me. The stench of expensive liquor washed over my face. "So good, aren't you? So damned good," he snarled, his voice loud enough to make the nearby tables fall silent and turn their heads. "You're the big boss now. You're on top of the world. And what am I? This husband of yours. I'm probably nothing in your eyes, am I?" "Kevin, what are you talking about?" I whispered, stunned, trying to take his arm. "Everyone is watching. You're drunk. Please, sit down." "Drunk?" He violently shook my hand off, his voice growing louder, more aggressive. "I might be drunk, but I've never been clearer. I am sick to death of living in my wife's shadow. Everywhere I go, all I hear is, 'Your wife is more successful than you. Your wife makes more money than you.' Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" The entire restaurant was now deathly quiet. Every single eye was fixed on us. I could feel my face flush, a hot wave of shame making my ears ring. I desperately looked toward my husband's family, pleading for help, but all I received were cold, indifferent stares. My father-in-law stared intently at his plate, pretending not to see a thing. My sisters-in-law were whispering to each other, cruel smiles playing on their lips. And my mother-in-law, Sharon, sat there with her arms crossed, looking at me with the triumphant gaze of a predator who had just cornered her prey. And then it happened. That vicious, soul-crushing slap. Kevin, the man I had loved and supported for 7 years, swung his hand and struck me across the face in front of everyone I knew. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony and public disgrace that was tearing my soul to shreds. He lunged at me again, grabbing a handful of my hair, ready to strike again. I squeezed my eyes shut, curling into a ball to brace for the next blow. In that horrifying moment, not a single member of his family moved to stop him. And then came Sharon's poison-laced words, the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. "Give her another one, Kevin. Tonight, not even God can save you." Seizing the moment when a few horrified colleagues finally intervened and pulled Kevin away, I scrambled to my feet. Not to run, but to find an escape route. I stumbled toward the restroom, pretending I needed to fix my dress. No one was paying attention to me anymore. They were too busy surrounding Kevin, the perpetrator of the crime. I slammed the restroom door shut and collapsed against the cool tiles, my body racked with silent, choked sobs. I looked at my pathetic reflection in the mirror. My hair was a mess. One cheek was already swelling and turning a deep red. The corner of my mouth was bleeding, and my expensive gown was stained and rumpled. 7 years of sacrifice, 7 years of patience for what? For a public beating and utter humiliation. It was enough. It was more than enough. Shaking uncontrollably, I pulled my phone from my purse. The screen was fractured with a spiderweb of cracks from the fall. My fingers trembled as I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in a very long time, a name I always told myself I would never need to call upon. But tonight, I had no other choice. The name was saved simply as Ethan. The call connected. "Hello?" A deep, calm male voice answered from the other end, a voice that had always, without fail, made me feel completely safe. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The tears flowed freely as I tried to force my voice into a whisper, terrified someone outside might hear. "Ethan, please, save me." The horrifying drama at my promotion party was only the beginning. Who was this mysterious brother named Ethan? What would he do to save me? And what would I do to fight back against the brutality of my husband and the cruelty of his entire family? The line on the other end went silent for exactly 3 seconds. 3 short seconds that stretched into an eternity for me. I could almost picture the change on Ethan's face, his usual stoic expression hardening into something sharp and cold as steel. Then, his voice came through, devoid of any panic, just a chillingly calm authority. "Where are you?" "The Starlight Room, at the Pinnacle Tower," I choked out, trying to make the words clear. "Go into the women's restroom. Lock the main door. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He spoke in short, clipped sentences, then hung up. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. And in the midst of the chaos, that simple command was a lifeline, bringing a strange sense of security to my storm-tossed soul. Shaking, I did as he said. I stumbled into the largest stall and locked the flimsy door. I slid down to the cold floor, hugging my knees to my chest, my entire body still trembling from the pain and the adrenaline. 15 minutes. I just had to hold on for 15 minutes. Outside, the clamor seemed to have subsided. The party was clearly over. I could hear my mother-in-law's shrill, commanding voice echoing in the hall. "Clean this mess up. What are you all standing around for? This is just our luck. We come for a celebration and end up with a disaster. Where's Kevin? Get him home, now." Drunk and making a scene, utterly humiliating. Not a single word of concern for the daughter-in-law her son had just brutally assaulted. In her eyes, I was just bad luck, the source of the trouble. Then I heard Kevin's voice, slurred with alcohol. "Where's my wife? Where is she hiding? I'm going to teach her a lesson tonight, see if she ever disrespects me again." His heavy footsteps grew closer, approaching the restroom. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath, pressing my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. "Grace, get the hell out here." He slammed his fist against the main restroom door. "How long are you going to hide in there? Are you coming out or not?" The door shuddered with each blow. I shrank back into the corner, gripped by a primal fear. I was terrified he would break the door down and continue his assault. "Kevin, "Let's just go home," Sharon's impatient voice cut in. "Forget about her. Can she hide forever? We'll deal with her when she gets home. You're making a scene. Someone is going to call security." Perhaps his mother's words finally got through to him. The banging stopped. I heard their footsteps fade away until they were gone completely. The world fell silent again, leaving only the sound of my own suppressed sobs. I don't know how long I sat there, only that when I finally looked up, my legs had gone numb. Just then, the phone in my hand vibrated. It was a text from Ethan. "Lobby, come alone." I took a deep breath, trying to summon the last of my courage. I looked at myself in the mirror, wiping away the tears, trying to smooth my tangled hair. I couldn't let Ethan see me in such a pathetic state. I unlocked the door and peeked outside. The hallway was deserted. I hurried to the elevator. When the doors opened to the main lobby, only a few staff members were left, quietly cleaning up. And then I saw him. Ethan was standing with his back to me, under the magnificent crystal chandelier. He wasn't in a suit, just a simple black shirt and dark trousers. His tall, solid frame radiated a unique aura, a quiet authority that made people instinctively take notice. He didn't have to do anything. His mere presence was enough to command the space around him. He must have heard my footsteps because he slowly turned around. His gaze swept over my swollen face, the dried blood at the corner of my mouth, my rumpled dress. For a fleeting second, I saw a glint in his eyes, as cold and sharp as a shard of glass, before it vanished. But when he spoke, his voice was unnervingly calm. "Can you walk?" I nodded, trying to keep my steps steady. He didn't ask anything else. He simply took off his own suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders, covering my disheveled appearance, before turning and leading the way out. We stepped out of the restaurant into the cool night air. A sleek, black Mercedes was waiting at the curb. A uniformed driver saw us and immediately got out, respectfully opening the passenger door. I hesitated for a moment before getting inside. The car pulled away from the curb, and the silence inside was heavy. Ethan sat beside me, staring straight ahead, not saying a word. But I knew this silence was more terrifying than 1,000 angry words. He was suppressing a hurricane. "Ethan," I started, wanting to say something, anything, to break the tension. "Get some rest first," he cut me off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We'll talk tomorrow when you have a clear head." The car stopped in front of a high-end condominium building in the heart of the city, a place I had never been before. Ethan led me up to a penthouse on the top floor. The apartment was vast, decorated in a minimalist style that was both elegant and understated, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the sparkling city lights. "You can stay here for a few days. It's safe. No one knows about this place," he said, his voice softening slightly. He showed me the bedroom and bathroom. "There's food in the fridge. Help yourself. I have some business to take care of. Someone will be by shortly to look at your injuries." With that, he turned to leave. "Ethan, wait," I called out. "Where are you going?" He paused at the door, not turning back, just inclining his head slightly. His voice dropped, becoming as cold as ice. "To get you justice." He didn't explain what he was going to do, but I knew with a chilling certainty that someone was going to pay a very high price for this night. As the door clicked shut behind him, I noticed that on the glass coffee table he had left a brand new smartphone, still in its box. My old phone, with its shattered screen, was probably useless now. His quiet, thoughtful gestures were always like that. But it was that same silence that now filled me with a deep sense of dread. I knew Ethan was not an ordinary man. His aura, his composure, and the way he handled things all pointed to a significant power operating behind the scenes. To get you justice. Coming from him, those words were not just a simple promise, they were a verdict. Was he going to do something reckless? What would happen to Kevin and his family after tonight? Suddenly, a sound from the new phone Ethan had left pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. A text message had just arrived from an unknown number, but its content was more shocking than the physical assault I had just endured. My entire body went cold. The message was short, but every word hammered into my already chaotic mind. "Miss Anderson, do you want to know why your husband, Kevin Miller, suddenly needed so much money he had to embezzle from your company? 10 a.m. tomorrow. Cortado Cafe. I'll give you the answer. Embezzling company funds? Kevin? How could those two words possibly exist in the same sentence? He was the company's head of sales, a man who always prided himself on his integrity, at least professionally. He could be abusive, he could be weak-willed, but embezzlement? I couldn't believe it. Who sent this message? Why did they know about Kevin's actions? And why contact me at this exact moment? Was this another one of my in-laws' cruel tricks, a scheme to pin more blame on me? Just then, the doorbell chimed. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. I remembered Ethan's words. Someone would be by to look at my injuries. Cautiously, I peered through the peephole. A middle-aged woman with a kind face, wearing a white coat and glasses, stood waiting patiently. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and opened the door. "Miss Anderson?" "I'm Dr. Evans. Ethan asked me to come by," she said, her voice soft and warm. She examined my injuries with gentle, professional hands. The bruise on my cheek was beginning to swell and darken, and the cut on my lip was small but deep. "It's mostly soft tissue damage, thankfully. Nothing broken, doctor," Evans said, after her examination. Then her eyes softened with concern. "But I can see some older, faded bruises on your arms and shoulders. It seems this isn't the first time." Her words were like a needle, piercing straight through the wall of denial I had so carefully built around myself. I said nothing, but a fresh wave of tears welled in my eyes. She was right. This wasn't the first time. The first time was about a year after our wedding. Kevin had come home drunk, and for no reason other than me nagging him about it, he shoved me to the ground. That time, he had knelt and cried, begging me to forgive him, blaming it on work, stress, and the alcohol. I believed him, and I forgave him. Then came the second time, and the third, and the times after that. The excuse was always the same. I was drunk. I'm too stressed. I didn't mean it. And after every incident, he would be filled with remorse, showering me with attention and affection. And I, like a fool, kept softening, kept telling myself that he loved me, that it was just a momentary loss of control. I hid it from everyone, especially from Ethan. I was ashamed, terrified of worrying him, and still clinging to the fantasy of a perfect marriage. "My dear," Dr. Evans said with a sigh, setting down her medical kit. "Silence is the soil in which evil grows. The more you endure, the more an abuser will escalate. Please, think carefully about what you need to do for yourself." Her words were like a bucket of ice water, shocking me into clarity. For 7 years, my silence had been his permission. My endurance had transformed him from a man with a temper into a monster without restraint. After Dr. Evans left, I sat alone in the vast, silent apartment. The physical pain was fading, but the ache in my soul was sharper than ever. I picked up the new phone. On the contact list, there was only one number saved, Ethan. I hesitated. Should I tell him about the anonymous text? I knew he would worry, that he wouldn't let me go. But I had to go. I had to know the truth. If Kevin really did this, I needed to know why. The next morning, I made my decision. Without a word to Ethan, I chose a conservative pantsuit, applied makeup to cover the worst of the bruising, and took a taxi to Cortado Cafe. I picked a table in a quiet corner by the window where I could see everyone who came in. My nerves were frayed. At exactly 10 a.m., a woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed but with a haggard look on her face, walked into the cafe. Her eyes scanned the room and then locked onto mine. She walked directly to my table. "You're Grace Anderson?" she asked, her voice raspy. I nodded. She sat down without ordering anything, placing an expensive leather handbag on the table. From it, she pulled a thick manila folder. "I don't have much time," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "I'm here because I'm a victim, just like you. I'm Diana Wallace. My husband is the CEO of Wallace Development, your company's biggest competitor." I was floored. The wife of our chief rival? Why was she seeking me out? "My worthless husband," she spat, her teeth clenched, "has been using a shell company, a company registered under your husband's name to launder money. He colluded with Kevin Miller, luring him into gambling, creating enormous debts for him. Then, he used those debts to force Kevin to embezzle your money and steal your company's confidential documents to pay it off. His ultimate goal is to bankrupt your firm, and your husband is nothing but a disposable pawn who will take the fall for all of it. Every word she spoke was like a lightning strike to my brain. It was a horrifying conspiracy, a tangled web of lies and criminality. My husband, Kevin, wasn't just an abuser. He was a gambler, an embezzler, a puppet dancing on someone else's strings. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because I can't take it anymore," she replied, her eyes bloodshot. "He didn't just betray me. He's planning to drain our family's entire fortune to fuel his addiction. I've gathered enough evidence to expose him, but I need your cooperation. You have the proof of Kevin's embezzlement. If we work together, we can put both of those bastards in prison." She pushed the folder across the table toward me. "This is just a fraction of what I have. Bank statements, recordings of their conversations. Look it over, then decide. I'll give you 2 days." With that, she stood up and left as quickly as she had come, as if afraid of being seen. I sat there alone, my limbs feeling heavy and useless, staring at the folder on the table. The truth was 1,000 times worse than I could have ever imagined. My life, my marriage, it was all just a piece in a dirty, calculated game. On the way back, I got a call from Ethan. He did not sound pleased. "Where were you?" I stammered. "You went to meet that woman, didn't you?" His voice turned cold. "Don't lie to me, Grace. I've had someone watching you since this morning. I told you to stay in the apartment. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" I was silent. I knew he was only worried about me. "Come back here. Now," he ordered. "I'm waiting for you." When I walked into the penthouse, Ethan was standing by the window, his arms crossed, his face a mask of controlled fury and unconcealed worry. I knew I was wrong to act on my own. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Sit down," he cut me off, gesturing to the sofa. I obeyed, not daring to look him in the eye. He walked over and placed a container of hot soup on the table. "Eat first, then we'll talk." While I ate, he sat in silence, watching me. His quiet disapproval was more unnerving than any lecture. When I finished, he finally spoke, his voice softer but still deadly serious. "Grace, do you know why I worry about you so much?" I shook my head. "Because you're my sister. You're the only family I have left in this world." He looked at me, his gaze deep and intense. "Do you remember? 20 years ago, on a stormy night, a drunk driver crashed into the foster home where we lived. That crash, it took my parents. I was a 10-year-old boy, and I had to watch them die. I thought I would drown in that grief, that I would be alone forever. But then, you showed up. A tiny, 5-year-old girl, so skinny and frail, but with the brightest eyes I had ever seen. You came over to me, took my hand and said, 'Don't cry anymore. From now on, I'll be your family.'" Tears streamed down my face as the memories flooded back the foster home, the difficult days warmed by a bond of shared hardship. Ethan, 5 years my senior, had always been there, my shield, my protector. He gave me the better portion of food, the warmer blanket. He taught me to read, taught me to be strong. "The day a good family adopted you, I was both happy and terrified," he continued. "Happy you would have a better life, but terrified there would be no one there to protect you. I swore to myself that day, no matter what it took, I would become so strong, so powerful, that no one would ever be able to bully my sister again. I clawed my way up in the world, Grace. I've done things you probably can't even imagine. All for that promise I made to a little girl a long time ago." Are you really in the mob?" I asked tremulously, remembering the sheer terror he had inspired in Kevin's family. Ethan let out a small, sad smile. "The line between a mobster and a businessman can be very thin, Grace. I just do what I believe is right. I protect the people I need to protect. I own a high-end security firm and have a few other business interests. Enough to make my voice heard in this city." He looked at me, his expression softening completely. 7 years ago, when you decided to marry Kevin Miller, I had him investigated. I knew he wasn't a good man, that his family was manipulative. But you were so in love, so happy. I couldn't bring myself to shatter your dream. I was wrong. My biggest mistake was my silence. I thought as long as I watched over you from the shadows, you'd be safe. I never imagined the real monster was sleeping right beside you. He clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. I should have stepped in sooner. I should never have let you suffer like this. Grace, forgive me. I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. No, you have nothing to be sorry for. It was me. I was stupid. I was blind. Ethan, what do I do now? I'm so lost. Ethan gently wiped my tears away, his calloused hand surprisingly gentle. It's okay. I'm here now. From this moment on, no one can ever hurt you again. He glanced at the folder Mrs. Wallace had given me. We're going to play this game together. And I promise you, Grace, for every tear they made you cry, I will make them pay back a river. His words weren't just a promise. I knew a storm was coming. A storm named Ethan, about to descend upon the lives of Kevin Miller and the men pulling his strings. But there was something Ethan didn't know. That deep within that storm, another secret was hiding, a secret connected to his own past. A secret that my new enemy was holding like a final, devastating trump card. Ethan's presence was like a powerful sedative, calming the storm inside me and giving me the strength to fight back. For the first time since that disastrous night, I no longer felt alone or afraid. With him by my side, I had a rock to lean on, someone who would never abandon me. Together, we meticulously went through the contents of the folder from Diana Wallace. Page after page contained damning evidence of a sophisticated and cruel conspiracy. Under Wallace's manipulation, Kevin had established a shell company, ostensibly for importing construction equipment. This company then created fraudulent contracts with overseas suppliers, which was a front for moving money out of the country. That money was a mix of funds Kevin embezzled from my accounts and loans from ruthless loan sharks. Once laundered, the clean cash flowed back into Wallace's personal accounts to fund his vast, international gambling habits. In this elaborate scheme, Kevin was nothing more than a pathetic, disposable pawn, exploited to his breaking point without ever understanding the true scale of the game. "The kid is a fool," Ethan murmured, his expression a mixture of anger and pity. He thought he was making big moves, proving himself to his wife, but all he was doing was digging his own grave. "He doesn't deserve pity," I said, my voice as cold as steel. "Stupidity isn't an excuse for criminality. He stole my money, he brutalized me, and he has to pay the price for what he did." Ethan looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes that quickly turned into satisfaction. "That's my sister. So what's your next move? I can have my guys, deal with both of them." One night, problem solved. I shook my head firmly. "No, I don't want violence. I want them to be utterly and publicly destroyed by the law. I want them to feel what it's like to lose everything, just like they planned to do to me." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice filled with a newfound resolve. "I'm going to file for divorce, I'm going to press charges, and I'm going to reclaim every single thing that belongs to me, down to the last cent." Ethan nodded, a rare smile gracing his lips. "Good. If that's your decision, I'll back you all the way. In this chess game, you'll be the one to call checkmate." But we were so focused on our next move that we never saw the enemy's counterattack coming. After the disastrous party, the Miller family had gone completely silent. Kevin didn't call or text. I assumed they were lying low, terrified after Ethan's brief, intimidating appearance. I was naive. Their silence was just the calm before a far more vicious storm. 2 days later, as I was working in the safety of Ethan's penthouse, a barrage of notifications exploded on my new phone. My name, Grace Anderson, had suddenly become a trending topic across social media. A flood of articles with sensational, slanderous headlines appeared. High-flying real estate VP's steamy affair with notorious mob fixer. The truth behind the promotion party. When a disrespectful wife gets what she deserves. Grace Anderson. Portrait of an ambitious woman who trampled her family for a taste of power. Accompanying these articles were candid photos of me and Ethan. Ethan draping his jacket over me as we left the restaurant, him guiding me into the luxury condo building, us sitting together in the cafe. Through the malicious lens of their narrative, Every gesture of brotherly care was twisted into evidence of an illicit affair. They had hired fake witnesses, people posing as colleagues and neighbors, to leave fabricated, slanderous comments, painting a picture that was the polar opposite of the truth. In their story, I was a shrewish, ungrateful wife who looked down on her husband, who used her success to belittle his family. And Kevin? He was painted as a long-suffering, tragic husband who had finally snapped under the pressure. The media assault was swift and brutal. I read every vicious article, every hateful comment, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and helpless frustration. They weren't just trying to ruin my reputation, they were trying to drag Ethan down into the mud with me. They wanted to flip the script, turning the victim into the villain, using the weight of public opinion to crush me into submission. Just then, my phone rang. It was Kevin. This time his voice held no trace of fear or regret. It was dripping with smug, arrogant triumph. "Well, having fun yet? You're famous now," he sneered. "Grace, I told you, you can't win against my family. You have two choices. One, you come home, get on your knees, and apologize to my mother, and we drop this whole divorce thing. Or two, you stay there with your mobster boyfriend and wait for society to spit on you, for your company to fire you, and for your life to be completely destroyed. The choice is yours." You are a despicable monster," I seethed. "Monster? Compared to what you've done to my family? This is nothing. I'll give you 1 day to think about it. Don't make me resort to more drastic measures," he said, then hung up before I could respond. I threw the phone onto the sofa, a feeling of utter powerlessness washing over me. I had severely underestimated their capacity for filth. They weren't just abusive and greedy. They were diabolically clever in their cruelty, willing to use the lowest tactics to get what they wanted. Ethan, who had been standing silently nearby, picked up the phone and scanned the articles. His face was a frozen mask of tranquility, but I knew that beneath the surface, a tsunami of rage was building. "They've just crossed the final line," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I was going to let you handle this, let the law take its course. But it seems some kinds of trash can't be cleaned up with conventional methods." He pulled out his own phone and dialed a number. "Leo, I need you to find every account that posted or commented on the stories about Grace. Trace the IPs, find out who's behind them. You have 30 minutes. He delivered the order with an air of absolute authority. "Oh, and one more thing. Get the car ready. We have business tonight." He ended the call and turned to me, placing a hand on my shoulder, his gaze both gentle and unyielding. "Don't worry, and stop reading this garbage. Leave everything to me. Tonight, I'm taking you to see a very special play. It's called A Sinner's Regret." I had no idea what he was planning, but looking into his eyes, I knew one thing for certain. Tonight, Kevin Miller and his entire family would not be sleeping peacefully. And perhaps I was beginning to realize, to fight true evil, sometimes goodness alone is not enough. But the thing that scared me most was the gnawing question. Was the Miller family the only enemy I was facing? That first anonymous text, the perfectly timed appearance of Diana Wallace, was it all just a coincidence? The name Golden Gate Holdings haunted my thoughts for days. $200,000, a figure that was anything but small, secretly transferred month after month for 3 straight years. It couldn't be a regular expense. If it were an investment, why had Kevin never mentioned it? If he was paying off a debt, who did he owe such a massive amount of money to, and why? A storm of questions swirled in my mind, leaving me no peace. I decided to do some digging myself before bringing it up with Ethan. I didn't want to add to his worries, and deep down, a vague, unsettling feeling made me reluctant to let him know about this company's existence, at least not until I had more information. I typed Golden Gate Holdings into a search engine. The results were sparse. It was a small-scale real estate firm with its main office in a nondescript Class B office building in a different part of the city. The company's website was amateurish, with only generic information about suburban land development projects. Nothing stood out. The legal representative was a name I'd never heard before, a Mr. David Chen, with no apparent connection to Kevin or anyone I knew. It felt like a dead end. I was about to close my laptop when a chilling thought struck me. Ethan had said he had a security firm and a few other business interests. Could it be possible? I immediately pushed the thought away. No, Ethan would never deceive me. He was the only family I had. Just then, Miss Crane, my lawyer, called, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Grace, I have great news. The court has officially served the summons to Kevin and his family. The first mediation session is scheduled for next week. With the evidence we have, I'm confident they won't dare to make things difficult." "Thank you, Miss Crane. That's wonderful," I said, though my mind was still heavy with thoughts of the mysterious company. "Oh, and about that holding company," she continued, as if reading my mind. "I had a contact do some digging, and there's a very interesting detail. Golden Gate Holdings was incorporated exactly 3 years ago, right around the time Mr. Wallace began his scheme. And its registered business address, it's the same address as one of your brother's old satellite offices for his security firm." A sheet of ice enclosed my heart. A coincidence? There was no way it could be that coincidental. Ethan's security firm. My heart began to pound erratically. A wild, yet terrifyingly logical theory started to form in my mind. Could it be? Had Ethan known everything all along? Was he secretly pulling the strings from behind the scenes, using both Kevin and me to execute some grand plan of his own? The questions I had tried to suppress now returned with overwhelming force. That first anonymous text message warning me about the embezzlement, why did it arrive at the perfect moment? The perfectly timed appearance of Diana Wallace, how did she find me and trust me so readily? And Ethan's brutal takedown of the Millers, how had he uncovered all their secrets so quickly? Everything seemed too perfect, too seamless, as if it had all been scripted. No, I couldn't doubt Ethan. He had saved me, protected me, but the evidence was staring me in the face, and it didn't lie. My head was spinning. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I was trapped in a chess game where it seemed every player had a secret agenda. That evening, Ethan came home with a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite. He found me sitting numbly on the sofa and asked with concern, "What's wrong? Are you still not feeling well?" I looked up at him, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just thinking about a few things." "Don't overthink it," he said, placing the flowers in a vase. "It's almost over. At the hearing next week, you just need to stay strong. Miss Crane and I will handle everything." His voice was as warm and reassuring as ever, but for some reason, I felt an invisible wall between us. I looked into his eyes, searching for an answer, but his deep, dark gaze was like an abyss I couldn't penetrate. "Ethan," I blurted out, do you know a company called Golden Gate Holdings?" Ethan froze for a split second, his hand hovering over a lily, but he recovered almost instantly, turning to me with a calm smile. "Golden Gate Holdings? The name sounds familiar. Some small real estate company, I think. Why do you ask?" He was lying. I knew he was lying. That momentary pause, however brief, didn't escape me. A man like Ethan, with his vast network of information, couldn't possibly have only a vague recollection of a company connected to one of his own properties. "Oh, no reason," I said quickly, changing the subject. "I just overheard someone mention it. The flowers are beautiful. Thank you." The conversation ended there, but in my heart, a wall of suspicion had been erected. I couldn't fully trust Ethan anymore. I felt like I was being pushed into an even more dangerous position. The enemy I could see was Kevin and his family, but what about the enemy in the shadows? Was it possible that the brother I loved and trusted was hiding another face? I couldn't sleep that night. I had to act. I couldn't just sit and wait for answers to fall into my lap. I had to uncover the truth about Golden Gate Holdings and Ethan's real role in this entire affair. Waiting until I was sure he was sound asleep, I crept into his home office. The room was simple: a large wooden desk, a bookshelf, and a laptop. I knew his password. It was the anniversary of his parents' death, a detail he had once let slip. My heart pounded against my ribs as I typed in the numbers. The screen lit up, and I quickly began searching through his files. Most were heavily encrypted, but one folder was unlocked. It was titled Project Phoenix. Curiosity overriding my fear, I opened it. Inside was a plan so detailed it made my blood run cold. It wasn't just a plan to help me get a divorce, it was a blueprint for a complete corporate conquest. It outlined every single step, from the accidental leak of Kevin's gambling problem to Diana Wallace, to the coincidental arrangement for her to meet me. It even detailed the use of Golden Gate Holdings to funnel the money Kevin embezzled, a brilliant move to create irrefutable evidence against him while simultaneously placing my stolen assets under Ethan's protection. The plan didn't stop there. The next phase detailed how, after Wallace's company inevitably collapsed, another anonymous corporation would acquire it for pennies on the dollar. The owner of that corporation was, of course, Ethan. My whole body trembled. It was all a performance, a grand play with Ethan as the director. He knew everything from the beginning. He had even helped push Kevin further down the path of self-destruction. He had used me, used my pain, as a pawn in his elaborate game of revenge and corporate warfare. I had escaped one gilded cage only to walk straight into a far more sophisticated trap. The brother I revered was just as calculating and ruthless as the Miller family. As I was about to close the laptop, one last file in the folder caught my eye. It was named The Final Secret. I hesitated. Could I bear to learn another devastating truth? But I had to know. I clicked it open. The file contained a short video clip. It was from a dashcam, recording a horrific accident on a rainy night. A large truck, speeding recklessly, slammed into a car stalled on the side of the road. The driver of the car was thrown from the vehicle, landing motionless on the wet pavement. I recognized the scene instantly. This was the accident that had taken the lives of Ethan's parents over 20 years ago. But why did he have this video? The camera then panned to the driver of the truck, who scrambled out in a panic. The image was grainy and blurred by the rain, but I could still make out the face. A face I could never forget. It was Kevin's father. My world shattered in that instant. Kevin's father, Mr. Miller, the man who always appeared so respectable and kind, the man I had called Dad for 7 years, was the hit-and-run driver who had orphaned my brother. Everything clicked into place, forming a picture so monstrous I could hardly breathe. Ethan's entire, intricate plan, Project Phoenix, his long, simmering revenge against Wallace and Kevin, it all stemmed from this one, dark, 20-year-old secret. He wasn't just helping his sister, he was avenging his parents, and I was the unwitting key to his entire scheme. The world dissolved around me. Kevin's father, Mr. Miller, the quiet, seemingly gentle man who had walked me down the aisle, the man I had shared countless holiday dinners with, was the monster who had destroyed Ethan's life. The dashcam video played on a horrifying loop in my mind, the screech of tires, the violent impact, and Mr. Miller's panicked face as he looked around, saw no one, and then sped away, leaving 2 people to die in the cold, unforgiving rain. He was a coward, a killer. Everything became terrifyingly clear. Ethan's master plan, his Project Phoenix, wasn't just about corporate greed or helping his sister. It was a 20-year vendetta, a cold, calculated quest for vengeance. And I, with my broken marriage and public humiliation, had been the perfect, unwitting catalyst to set his plan in motion. I was a key, used to unlock a door he had been waiting to kick down for 2 decades. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face, my body cold and numb. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, a wound deeper than any Kevin had inflicted. Ethan had lied to me, manipulated me, and used my suffering as a weapon. He was no different from the rest of them, weaving a web of deceit to serve his own ends. I crept back to my room and lay awake until dawn, my mind a whirlwind of grief, anger, and a chilling, terrifying fear. I feared what Ethan was capable of. I feared the darkness that had been driving him all these years. He wasn't just a protective older brother, he was an avenger, and his justice was poised to annihilate the entire Miller family. But as the sun began to cast a gray light over the city, a sliver of doubt pierced through my emotional chaos. It was all too neat, too perfect. Ethan's plan was a masterpiece of manipulation, but its foundation rested on one single piece of evidence, that grainy dashcam video. Where had it come from after 20 years? Who had been holding on to it? A part of me, the part that had spent years evaluating multi-million-dollar deals and spotting inconsistencies, couldn't just accept it. I needed to know the whole truth, not just the version Ethan had presented to me. I couldn't be a pawn in anyone's game. Not anymore. I had to find my own answers. I started with the video itself. I watched it again and again, this time not as a grieving sister, but as an analyst. I magnified the footage, looking for details. On the side of the truck, barely visible through the rain, was a faded logo, a stylized crossroads with the name Crossroads Freight. My investigation began there. The company had gone bankrupt over a decade ago, but corporate records are hard to erase completely. I used my professional research skills, digging through old business registries and public archives. After hours of dead ends, I found a name, Sal Petrocelli, the last known foreman of Crossroads Freight. Finding him was another challenge, but I was relentless. I finally tracked him down to a small, quiet suburb on the south side of Chicago. I found him tending his small garden in front of a modest brick house. He was an old man, his face a roadmap of a long, hard life. When I introduced myself and told him why I was there, his friendly demeanor vanished. A guarded, weary look came over his eyes. "That was a long time ago," he said, his voice gravelly. "Some things are better left buried. 2 people died that night," I pressed gently but firmly, "and the man responsible is about to have his life destroyed. If there's more to the story, you have to tell me. Please." I don't know what he saw in my eyes, desperation, sincerity, but he sighed heavily and motioned for me to follow him inside. The house was filled with the smell of old wood and tomato sauce. He led me to a dusty back room and pulled an old metal lockbox from a closet. "I knew this day would come," he mumbled, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. "I should have gone to the cops back then, but I was scared. I had a family to feed." He pulled out a small, worn photograph. "This is the man who was really behind it all." I took the picture. It showed a much younger man, handsome and arrogant, leaning against a luxury car. The face was instantly recognizable, though without the lines of age and stress. It was Mr. Wallace. "Wallace?" I whispered, completely bewildered. "Yeah," Sal nodded. "Back then, he was just starting out, a real shark. He and the man who owned that car, Ethan's father, were bitter rivals in the logistics business. Wallace was losing. Badly. Sal's story came tumbling out, a confession he had held on to for 20 years. The night of the accident, he had seen Wallace sneaking around the truck yard. He thought it was odd, but didn't think much of it until after the crash. Mr. Miller, he explained, was a good driver, a decent man who was just starting out. He was set up. "The kid's brakes were cut," Sal said, his voice cracking. "It wasn't an accident. It was murder. Wallace planned the whole thing to ruin his rival and then pinned it on the new guy, Miller. Miller panicked and ran. He was a coward, but he wasn't the killer. Wallace was." He then handed me the most damning piece of evidence, an old, yellowed maintenance log. Next to the entry for Mr. Miller's truck that day, there was a tiny, almost invisible notation he had made himself. "Brake line looks tampered. Reported to office. W. Told me to ignore." W for Wallace. I stared at the logbook, then at the photo, my mind struggling to process the enormity of it. I had been reeling from one devastating truth, only to be hit by another, even more monstrous one. Ethan's entire life's mission, his meticulously crafted revenge, was aimed at the wrong man. He had been hunting a shadow, a scapegoat, while the true devil had been hiding in plain sight, laughing at them all. And in a twist of cruel irony, this same devil was the man Ethan was now playing a corporate chess game with, completely oblivious to the fact that he was the monster who had started it all. The architect of all our pain was not the man we were trying to destroy, but the man we were using to do it. Leaving Sal's quiet suburban house, both Ethan and I were enveloped in a heavy, suffocating silence. The truth we had just unearthed was too shocking, too monstrous. It upended everything we thought we knew, every action we had taken. Ethan drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. But I knew his mind was somewhere else, entirely lost in the past, in a maelstrom of grief and a renewed, white-hot rage. The enemy he had hunted for half his life wasn't the cowardly Mr. Miller, but the very man he was systematically destroying in the boardroom. The architect of his parents' murder was his corporate rival, Mr. Wallace. "What are you going to do now?" I asked softly, breaking the tense silence. Ethan didn't answer right away. He pulled the car into a deserted parking lot overlooking Lake Michigan and cut the engine. The last rays of the setting sun painted his chiseled face in shades of orange and gray, making him look older, harder. "I was wrong," he said, his voice raw. "I let hate blind me. I almost destroyed an innocent man's life." He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, though God knows he's no saint. But Wallace, to think it was him all along. He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw a terrifying combination of pain and cold fury in his eyes. "He has to pay. I won't let him live another day in peace." "What are you planning, Ethan?" I asked, a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. "Your plan to take over his company is already in motion. Isn't that enough?" "Take his company?" he interrupted, his voice dangerously low. "That's a slap on the wrist. A man who commits murder deserves to pay with his life. I'll handle him my way." My blood ran cold. I knew what his way meant. It meant the law of the street, blood for blood. "No, Ethan, you can't," I pleaded, grabbing his arm. "If you do that, you'll be no better than him. You'll become a criminal. Your parents wouldn't want that for you. We have evidence now. We have a witness. Let the police handle it. Let the law punish him." "The law?" He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Where was the law when my parents were left to die on the side of the road? Where was the law when you were being beaten by your husband and slandered by his family? Grace, you're too good for this world. Some monsters can only be dealt with by force." For the first time, we were truly arguing. I tried desperately to pull him back from the edge of a vengeful abyss, but it seemed hopeless. The hatred had been festering inside him for too long, and this new revelation had just fanned it into an inferno. Just then, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Leo, his trusted assistant. "Boss, we have a situation. Wallace just called. He wants to meet you, tonight. Urgently." He sounded panicked, like he knows something is closing in on him. Ethan's expression sharpened. "Where?" "A private bar downtown. The Black Rose, VIP room, top floor, 9 p.m. "I'll be there," Ethan said and hung up, his face becoming a mask of cold calculation. The old fox can smell the trap. He must have realized someone is systematically dismantling his empire. "You're still going?" I asked, my voice filled with dread. "Ethan, it's obviously a setup." "So what if it is?" he replied with a chilling smile. "I'm also curious to see what tricks he has up his sleeve." He looked at me, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "Go home and rest, Grace. Leave tonight to me." But I couldn't. I couldn't let him walk into that danger alone. That night, I told Ethan I was going back to the penthouse, but instead, I took a taxi and followed him from a distance. I watched his car disappear into the parking garage of the Black Rose, a notorious and chaotic nightclub. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't go inside. All I could do was stand across the street in the shadows, my eyes glued to the windows of the VIP lounge on the top floor, praying for his safety. Time crawled by. Every minute felt like an hour. Then, after what felt like an eternity, I heard it faintly at first, then louder the sound of shouting, of glass shattering, and then a single, sharp, deafening bang that ripped through the night. A gunshot. My world stopped. Ethan. I didn't think. I just ran, dodging traffic, sprinting towards the club. People were screaming, pouring out of the entrance in a panicked mob. I fought my way through the crowd, pushing my way up the stairs to the second floor. The hallway was blocked by the club's security, but I could see past them, toward the partially open door of the VIP room. I saw figures struggling inside, and then I saw Ethan. He was clutching his arm, blood seeping through his dark shirt. Across from him, Mr. Wallace stood, his face a grotesque mask of rage, a pistol in his hand. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Wallace shrieked, his voice cracking with madness. "You and that bitch, Grace, you're both going to die tonight." He aimed the gun directly at Ethan's chest. I screamed, a raw, terrified sound torn from my throat. Another shot rang out, but it wasn't Ethan who fell. In a blur of motion, Leo, Ethan's assistant, had burst into the room from a side door, smashing a heavy chair over Wallace's head. Wallace crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Instantly, plainclothes police officers swarmed in from every direction, securing the scene. It turned out Ethan had anticipated the danger all along. He had alerted the police, turning Wallace's ambush into an elaborate sting operation. The fight and the gunshots were part of his plan to catch Wallace in an undeniable act of attempted murder. I rushed to his side. "Ethan, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said through gritted teeth, his face pale but his eyes clear. "It's just a graze." He looked at Wallace being handcuffed and hauled away, then he looked at me. "Sorry to make you worry." The monster was finally caught. But in that moment, as the adrenaline faded, I felt a strange emptiness. The arrest of Wallace had exposed a terrible crime, but it also meant that we had become central figures in a murder investigation that stretched back 20 years. As the police led Wallace away, he turned, his eyes locking onto me with pure hatred. He spat on the floor. "You think you've won?" he snarled, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "This is far from over. Why don't you ask your lawyer?" "Go on. Ask my dear cousin, Miss Crane, who she's really been working for this whole time." His words hung in the chaotic air, another bomb dropped into the wreckage of our lives. The lead detective looked at us, his expression grim. "He's not entirely wrong, Miss Lime. Crane has been our confidential informant on Wallace for months, but I can assure you, her motives were entirely her own." The final, venomous words of Mr. Wallace echoed in the aftermath, revealing a web of deceit more tangled than we could ever have imagined. Miss Crane, our trusted lawyer, the sharp, compassionate woman I thought was my advocate, was Wallace's cousin. She had been playing a double game, using me and Ethan as instruments in her own long, simmering family vendetta. The revelation was the last piece of a sprawling, multi-generational puzzle of hatred and betrayal. In the weeks that followed, the full, sordid history of three families, the Andersons, the Millers, and the Wallaces, was laid bare by a sweeping federal investigation. Wallace's confession, combined with the evidence from Sal, my grandmother's diary, and the contents of the USB drive from Diana Wallace, painted a complete picture of a dynasty built on lies and blood. The patriarchs of the Wallace and Miller families were not rivals, but brothers. They had orchestrated a decades-long scheme, a twisted play of feigned animosity, to consolidate power and wealth by destroying their competitors and manipulating their own children. Their feud was a smokescreen to hide their collaborative crimes. The trial was a media sensation, a grim epic of American ambition curdled into pure evil. It was a story of stolen inheritances, swapped identities, and murders disguised as accidents. The court delivered the harshest possible sentences. The two masterminds, Wallace's father and Kevin's father, received life sentences without parole for orchestrating multiple murders and running a criminal enterprise. Wallace himself, for his direct role in the killings and financial crimes, received the same fate. The rest of the pawns in their game, Kevin, his mother Sharon, and others were given sentences that reflected their complicity. The scales of justice, after tilting for so long, had finally found their balance. After the verdicts, our lives began to slowly, cautiously move into the light. The truth about his adoptive father had shattered Ethan. He retreated into himself, locking himself away from a world that had proven to be a lie. But this time, he wasn't alone. My cousin Alex, who had flown back from overseas, and I refused to let him drown. We sat with him. We talked. We were simply present, reminding him that the family he had built on a foundation of love was real, even if the one from his past was not. The cold, hard shell of the underworld figure began to crack and fall away. Ethan dissolved his security firm, reinvesting his considerable assets into legitimate businesses and a charitable foundation dedicated to helping children in the foster care system. He was no longer an avenger. He was a builder. Alex, with his expertise in technology, founded a leading cybersecurity firm, working with law enforcement to prevent the kind of sophisticated financial crimes that had nearly destroyed us. My first priority was my real mother. We brought her back from the Vincent Institute, that house of horrors disguised as a hospital. Years of trauma had taken their toll, and her memory was a fractured mosaic. But in the quiet safety of a new home, surrounded by the unconditional love of her family, she began to heal. Some days, there would be a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a soft smile that was a ghost of the woman she once was. And for me, those small moments were everything. I also reached out to the woman who had raised me, my adoptive mother. I understood now that she too was a victim, a lonely woman used as a pawn her whole life. I brought her to live with us. The two mothers, one who gave me life and one who gave me a life, found a strange, silent comfort in each other's company in the twilight of their years. My marriage to Kevin was over, a painful chapter closed. Surprisingly, after he served his reduced sentence for his cooperation, he came to see me. He didn't ask for a second chance. He only offered a raw, honest apology and asked for one thing: the chance to be a father to our son. Seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, I agreed. Our son deserved a father, and a father who had learned from his sins was better than no father at all. A year later, on a warm summer evening, we were all gathered at a cozy house by the lake. Me, my two mothers, Ethan, Alex, and my little boy, his laughter echoing in the garden. We were no longer broken pieces of separate, warring families. We were a new family, forged in fire and bound by a love that had proven stronger than generations of hate. That night, as I was putting away some old boxes, I found a letter my adoptive mother had written to me years ago but had never had the courage to give me. In it, she confessed one final secret. The night of the fire at the foster home, the night she had saved me, she had saved another child as well, a little boy. Fearing for his safety from the powerful families she knew were hunting him, she had secretly placed him in another, more distant foster home. That boy was Ethan. Ethan and I weren't just foster siblings. We were cousins, the last two blood relatives of our generation, a bond of fate that had drawn us together through the darkest of times. I folded the letter, a gentle smile on my face, and looked out the window. Ethan and Alex were teaching my son how to skip stones across the water, their laughter mixing with his. The long night of pain and vengeance was finally over. The past was no longer a ghost that haunted us, but a lesson that had made us stronger. A new dawn was breaking, bright and full of promise, and I knew with absolute certainty that as long as we had each other, we could face anything. The greatest inheritance our ancestors had left us wasn't a legacy of hatred, but the unbreakable power of family.